back after our little break, and perfect timing. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. UFC 301, Canelo versus Munguia, and Inoue's massive win, as we'll get to. But first, everyone who knows us knows that we're an MMA-centric show, even though we do talk some boxing. So we'll start with UFC 301. And I wanted to start off by kind of talking about how the hype was for this card, because I get it, like UFC 299 and UFC 300 were these stacked mega cards, historic for the company, and it's hard to top that. But this one just felt like it had little to no hype behind it, at least here in the States. Maybe it was more hyped up in Brazil, but what did you think about the hype coming into this one?
Yeah, the same way, it wasn't really until like fight week that, everyone got talking and stuff. Because the main event was announced like obviously pretty well in advance of the card. I think once people saw the unknown challenger and Steve Erceg, hype was just kind of dying down. I think a lot of people were just already reassured that Alexandre Pantoja has all the makings to be a dominant champion, and then once they see someone that is still up and coming and kind of in a way jumping to the front of the line for the title shot, not many people are getting all that amped about it, but and then at the same time, it's a foreign card, so that UFC wants to get those Brazilian fighters as much as they can, and get those matchups like Jose Aldo and Jonathan Martinez, for example. So, but I mean, in terms of the card itself and the results and all that, I think there was still a lot to chew on and stuff and break down and evaluate going forward. So, the flyweight title was on the line. Pantoja remains champion. So
Might as well hop right into that, right? I mean, as you said, for those who haven't seen it though, like you said, Pantoja defeats Erceg by unanimous decision, 248-47s and 149-46, and he retains his flyweight title at home in Brazil. A super tough fight. I think people like me and you, we've kind of been hyping up Erceg a little bit, especially like in his short run in the UFC so far. He's really had some great performances. So I think the hardcores knew that this one was going to be a fun scrap. But the more casual fans, you see those two names, you probably don't really think much of it. You see that Erceg's been in the UFC for less than a year, and you're like, well, how is the number 10 contender getting to a flyweight title shot? And I think if you saw the fight play out, then you understood it, because Steve Erceg, he showed up. I personally thought Pantoja deserved the win. I know there was like some debate about it, but I didn't really think there should have been. I thought it was a close fight, don't get me wrong, but I thought that Pantoja like clearly had it at least 3-2, and that's kind of like where I ended up. When I was first watching it, I actually had it 4-1, but then when I rewatched it, I didn't give Pantoja the second round anymore. So the way I had it, it was Pantoja 1, 3, and 5, and Erceg 2 and 4. But I thought that Erceg just made a massive mistake in round 5 shooting for that takedown. I think he was winning that round up until that point, and according to the scorecards, that could have even won him the fight. So what did you think of this one, man?
not even like necessarily the round itself. You could say it was winning. I think even the fight itself, you could say it was winning, keeping it on the feet for the entire time, giving Pantoja those fits on the feet. I think at the beginning, Pantoja had a pretty good feel for Steve Erceg striking and just kind of playing more defense and just not obviously not getting hit as much. And then it seemed like it's somewhere midway through that that jab was really giving Pantoja fits, and then he really didn't have like it's clearly Alexander Pantoja wanted it to get to the ground, have Steve Erceg in his clinch and all that, and just not let, because Erceg's clearly a pretty precise striker. I think he had maybe not the most powerful, but it's the flyweight division anyways. And it seemed, even when we got to that fifth round, just the IQ. I mean, because you feel for the guy for sure. Like his first title fight, he's still obviously up and coming. Like afterwards, he was talking about how he blew it and all that. So obviously, I think he knows that he clearly had a path to get in the belt, but yeah, I mean, it's obviously a lot easier said than done when you're in there. You're in that fifth final round. You got to throw out all the stops pretty much as a challenger. So, especially when you're in the champions, you're in the champions' home turf. He's obviously got the whole crowd behind him and all that, so that can't be easy. But I mean, yeah, I think I would hope that we're all in agreement that Steve Erceg is probably not that far away from getting another title shot at some point, and maybe one of these fight night cards he'll end up headlining or something. Or
I think he definitely deserves that at the least, or just a big fight next, because I mean, a lot of the casual fans and even some hardcore fans are really counting him out in this one. But, like you kind of alluded to, like his timing is just phenomenal. And he may not be that powerful, whether that's because of his own power of just being a flyweight. But he's got that knack for the striking, man. He clearly just outstruck Pantoja as the fight went on. I think that the real turning point was round 3 when he hit him with that elbow and cut him.
Yeah.
Because when Erceg hit him with that, it seemed like Pantoja was a little bit compromised for the rest of that round and then the entire 4th round. And honestly, the beginning of the 5th, too. I just think Erceg shooting for the takedown was the big mistake, because if he wouldn't have done that, he probably would have outstruck him in the 5th as well, and we might be having a totally different conversation right now. So you do got to feel for the guy, because like you said, I didn't even see that he said that he thought he blew it. It was getting so late that night, I was exhausted. But that's probably why I gave Pantoja 49-46 in the moment, because it was, I don't know how that judge did that. I don't know how I did that, but I don't know. I thought it was a 48-47 Pantoja win. But it was a fun fight. I mean, it was a cool way to end that event. A lot of fun matchups on the card, and this one was a pretty low-key main event for a lot of reasons that we talked about. But Pantoja kind of shows us the grit and the heart of a champion, and Erceg proved why he deserved that shot at the title, and why he showed why the UFC had so much faith in him. And I think that this fight ultimately was really good for both guys, which maybe people didn't think in the beginning, because a lot of people probably thought, oh, well, Pantoja's fighting the number 10 contender. What's this going to do for his legacy? But when that contender put on such a show and really almost beat him and took him to his breaking point, the fact that Pantoja overcame that and then came back to win this fight, I thought that that was really incredible, honestly. So shout out to both of those guys, man, because I think that this was such a fun main event to have.
And it's not really all that fair to Pantoja. I think even before Pantoja even really got his chance at the title, let alone become the champion, because especially we've been talking about it, how the guy clearly needs a title shot. He's been ready, and
especially when Moreno was champion, because he had already beaten him multiple times. We're like, how is this dude clearly not the number 1 contender?
Yeah, man. We knew the guy was the real deal, and now that he's got the belt, and just defended it for the first time, obviously, I think it's not really fair to him to, at least from fans and stuff, to get that flat, even in this sense where obviously he was Erceg had him on the ropes, and then Erceg made a mistake of his own to allow Pantoja to...
Wasn't that his second defense? I'm wait, hold on. I'm on Tapology. Yeah, because he beat Moreno, and then he beat Royval a few months ago. Remember, that was on the Leon Colby card.
Yeah.
So that kind of got over.
Exactly. Yeah, I've been thinking more of Moreno and Royval, but that obviously wasn't for the belt. But, so his second defense...
building up a little legacy.
And I feel like you won't get the amount of credit for it because of how thin the lightweight contenders are seemingly getting and all that.
That's kind of where I wanted to take the conversation next, honestly, because you talk about the flyweight contenders. There's not really anyone clear. I looked at the rankings, and the one name I wrote down here was Muhammad Makayev, but his last win wasn't super impressive. And right now, it just seems like Pantoja's kind of fought everybody that he could fight who deserves the title. So I feel like he should just wait and let the division settle.
Makayev is still super young, too. I think that UFC's doing, it's in, his best interest to not just to push him immediately to that title shot and then, risk having, any sort of confidence or whatnot, going forward, and the next thing you know, Muhammad Makayev never gets back to the title, because he fought for it before he was really ready. So
I feel like they've learned since that Darren Till title shot against Tyron Woodley, because it seemed like Darren wasn't really the same after that.
It's how I feel. Yeah, it's how I feel about multiple divisions, honestly. Like lightweight, for instance, with the reaction to Dustin Poirier getting the title shot, because once again, the Sarukian fight wasn't as convincing as you would have hoped, obviously. And then even with light heavyweight, a guy like Magomed Ankalaev, like. Is he really there? Is he really able to hang with Alex Pereira yet at this point? Like, I don't know. I think it's still fair.
That draw too versus Jan a few years ago, kind of like, I feel like that soured the UFC's opinion of him for some reason. Like, it's not his fault,
Yeah.
but
yeah,
I don't know. It's flyweight's in an odd place, and really it has been a lot of times during the run of this podcast.
Obviously, it's unfortunate you don't have a rivalry like Moreno Figueiredo anymore to keep things afloat and keep giving those.
What do you mean, dude? Henry Cejudo saved the flyweight.
we can't ever let that joke die.
Yeah, I love that he truly believes that too. That's the funny part. Don't get me wrong. Like I think Henry's polarizing in some ways, but yeah, we'll save that discussion for another day. But he's funny. We'll just leave it at that. But yeah, I mean, flyweight, I think there's potential. There are guys who are coming up the ranks who just aren't really there yet at that title shot level.
Yeah.
So I think that there's potential.
Exactly.
I really do.
It's tough, because all you're really doing is putting the fighter under that much more scrutiny in a way. And then, obviously if they don't get like Erceg, and then it's good to see Erceg not getting a bunch of flack and hate and whatnot for how he fought, because I think we all clearly respect, like, he's earned that respect now that he'll be back at some point. It was just now obviously wasn't his time. So yeah,
it was a fun main event, but pretty fun card overall. We had a lot of fun matchups, and I think one of the ones with more marquee value, which I think this card lacked a little bit, but this one, Jose Aldo versus Jonathan Martinez, I think that was a fight that fans in Brazil especially were really looking forward to, but I think every MMA fan looks forward to a Jose Aldo fight. He's an MMA legend, and this was his UFC return after semi-retiring, because he did box in the meantime. We can't really forget about that. But he came back against Jonathan Martinez, defeated him by just a clear unanimous decision, 3-30-27s. And I even put this in the notes, like, we could talk about the fight. We know about Aldo's striking. His striking is phenomenal. Jonathan Martinez's striking is phenomenal too. They're kind of similar in a way, because Martinez has a lot of really good leg kicks, but Jose Aldo kind of showed him that there's levels to this game in a sense, because when you fight a guy who's that level of a champion, you kind of find out sometimes.
Yeah, you think your leg kicks are good, and then you fight Jose Aldo, and he shows you another level. So
the good thing about Jose Aldo too, though, is that he's not only are his leg kicks good, but his boxing is phenomenal, and he's one of those guys too who doesn't really have a one-dimensional style of striking, because he has really good boxing, but he also has really good Muay Thai, and he blends those two styles so well. And I think that that's kind of what led Jonathan Martinez to struggle in this fight, because Aldo can really hit you with anything. And he's just so versatile. And even getting older, he still has that speed and that power and the aggression. I love watching him fight, man. It's a privilege every single time we get to see him go into the octagon. And especially lately, because of the retirement, you really savor it more and more when Jose Aldo gets in there. And it was so cool to watch him in Brazil get a huge win like this. And now his UFC contract is up, but he did express a little bit of interest of maybe coming back to the UFC if he could maybe skip the line and get a title shot against Sean O'Malley. And I guess that's where I'll take the conversation. Do you think that that's a possibility? And if it is a possibility, do you think that Jose Aldo versus Sean O'Malley would be a good fight?
I don't know how really much of a possibility it is, but I still think Jose Aldo is still very capable of, keeping down a lot of hopeful bantamweight contenders, guys that aren't ranked yet and stuff, and just keeping them down, because once you get to the top there, it's I think you would kind of just like hate to see Jose Aldo go out on a bad note, obviously. And obviously this top of this bantamweight division is, still super capable of, any of these top 5 guys really of taking that belt. So like, in like a dream scenario sort of sense between Sean O'Malley and Jose Aldo, I think that would obviously get a lot of people talking and stuff. It's just tough now. Obviously, Jose Aldo on the back end of his career, and Sean O'Malley is still just in his prime and still defending the belt. So it's tough. I don't really. I guess like I don't know how really much. I guess more in the UFC sense, like how much would really be at stake for them if they went and gave Jose Aldo a title shot? I think for this card here was like, like a rather underwhelming Brazil card, and they were able to get Jose Aldo to return obviously and get him as the co-main event and get a lot of hype behind that. But I guess it really goes to show. And then, obviously for Sean O'Malley himself too, there's still, once again, there's still guys that I think you'd want to see him defend against first. And then, if he can get past them, then, who really else is there anyways? But
I think at that point he might go up to 45. He seems to be interested in doing that. And I kind of agree with you, like with the UFC's perspective. Like they're probably thinking Jose Aldo is on the back end of his career. Do we really want him beating a guy like Sean O'Malley, who's proven to be a star, especially with the younger generation? And then, if Aldo fights maybe one more time and retires, then the title's vacant and you have to throw a fight together in that sense, which I don't know if the UFC really wants to do that. Like, I don't think it has anything to do with, like, disliking Aldo. I think it's more just looking out for the future of the company, knowing that Aldo's time is limited. And there are contenders, like you said, we got Merab. That fight apparently could happen in September, but that's just rumors right now, speculation. And obviously I think any MMA fan would love to see the striking battle between O'Malley and Sandhagen, Sandhagen's another guy who deserves that shot at bantamweight. So I agree with you. I don't think it's very likely. I don't know if he comes back to the UFC, though, if he doesn't get a title shot. Because, like, if he could go make more money boxing or even just in another promotion, which I really don't think. I think if he does anything, he'd probably just box. But I don't know. I personally would love to see him do that, make more money, because he's a legend. He deserves to get that paycheck every time he goes out there. And I'm sure he gets it from the UFC, but that boxing money sometimes can be different.
He's clearly obviously still a good test for anybody looking to get that number next to their name. You saw here with Jonathan Martinez, like, I think, Martinez still showed a lot of potential in his own right. This is obviously not a loss. That's going to set him back a whole lot. So, yeah, that's how I feel.
Yeah, fought a legend. There's nothing crazy that he really could have done about it unless, he really stepped up. But now I think, he's fought a guy like Jose Aldo. Jonathan Martinez is still a really good fighter, a really fun striker to watch. He's beaten a lot of good guys. He's on a big win streak before this. So I think we'll see him back stronger than ever. I think that he'll get the rub from this fight a little bit. But to move on to the next fight, Anthony Smith versus Vitor Petrino. And I think that this was one of Anthony Smith's best wins in a while, man. And don't be silly, jump the gilly. That's the note that I put in here. And it was just clear path to victory. It seemed like Anthony Smith's jab and his leg kicks were giving Petrino problems early on, and Petrino tried to get it to the ground because of that, and he just did it with a really sloppy double leg, and that guillotine was just right there for the taking for Anthony Smith. I really think it's as simple as that for this fight. Just great jiu-jitsu and Anthony Smith's, high-level experience. I think that really propelled him to this win. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's not really a whole lot to tear down about this fight anyways. Just clearly just a big mistake there from Petrino. And that's pretty much all she wrote. Big win for Anthony Smith. He clearly needed it. Still a guy, he talked about how he's not thinking about the title anymore. So, that's a good, obviously, kind of mindset to have at this point in his career for him. And then I think he can, obviously keep stacking them with fights like these, fights like this against guys like these, and see what happens. So
I've also thought about this too. Like, you gotta imagine like a lot of fighters on their way up, they're like, of course they're thinking of the UFC title, but they're not thinking about like how they can politic their way and pick fights to get to the title. Like those up and coming guys, like they're just like, let me win every fight and they can't deny me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Anthony Smith has had that perspective probably in his initial title run when he fought John Jones. And I think since then he's kind of thought about, okay, what's my path to get back? And I think now that he has that mentality of like, let me just win the fight in front of me, and if I keep doing that, they can't deny me. I think that's such a cool mentality for him to have, and he's a smart dude. I know that like MMA fans like to give him crap sometimes because of some of his takes that seem a bit absurd, but as a fighter, I really respect Anthony Smith. I mean, this was his 57th pro fight.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who's fought so many killers over the years, and I really don't think we've seen the last of him towards the top of the division. Even if he doesn't get back to a title shot, I think he has so many skills in all of MMA that can do him some good in the light heavyweight division. But to move down a weight class to middleweight, we have Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. God, I knew I was going to butcher that. We were literally just talking about it before the show that I was going to butcher that name. But, this was a great win, though, for Michel Pereira because, I mean, it seems like Pereira has found his weight class here at 185 because this is, his third straight first-round finish. So,
yeah, he's killing
granted,
it.
This one was a little bit nerve-wracking towards the end there with that
dude.
flip. He's got to be careful with that, dude, doesn't he?
Dude, he was such a big favorite coming into this fight, and rightfully so. Like, I don't think really anybody was going up against that. Because you knew, obviously, he's going to waste no time from the opening bell, and he's going to look to get that finish however it comes. So then I think once you saw him do the flip, and his knee landed on his head like that, oh my God, man, that definitely got a lot of people, frozen for a second. Like, oh my God, he didn't just fuck this up, did he?
I'd be so scared if they did, overturn it. In Brazil, his home country, oh my God, their reputation sometimes, they can be rabid fans, dude. So I'm glad that he did get the win because he deserved it anyway. He just fought such a good fight. And I honestly, when you look at the shot, the shin and the knee kind of did hit him in the head, but it was like a grazing shot. Maybe it did do some damage, maybe it didn't. But I think that the intent does kind of matter, and I really don't think that he was trying to hit him like that. I think it was just more for the wow factor. I just think that he just needs to be careful with that because he's got so much skill all around. He's at 185. He's so fast. He's got a lot of power, and clearly his submission game is phenomenal. And I just love watching the dude fight. I mean, 3 straight first-round finishes at this weight class. When are we going to see him fight a top 15 guy? I think that's the real question.
It's clear now. He overwhelms these newer up and coming guys straight from the jump, and obviously it can lead to something just getting right into his guard or something, or obviously in this case he had the guillotine.
It was kind of on a scramble, and then he had it was like a standing guillotine.
Yeah. So I think it's definitely time now for sure. Obviously with Michel Pereira as well, who's been around for a while as well. So
and he's kind of been around this point before. Even at welterweight, he was kind of teetering around that top 15. And so, in my opinion, Pereira was already doing pretty good at 170. He goes up to 185, and he has this run that he's been on. Why not give him that next step up just to see? I mean, he's so exciting. Why would you not want that guy to get the leg up and maybe get it into the rankings and have some bigger fights in the future? But, staying at 185, though, another guy who's super exciting here's another name that I'm going to probably butcher. Caio Borralho, something like that.
Go.
We'll get there, man. We'll get there. I've been saying that since 2022 with these Brazilian and Russian names in particular, but we will get there. But Caio Borralho starches Paul Craig with just a crazy left hand in the second round. Mm-hmm. And, this fight was another one that's kind of like a clear breakdown. Paul Craig is just not the striker that Caio is. And Caio kind of proved it in this one. And Paul Craig, we've known his game is really one-dimensional at times. sometimes he's able to kind of, use his striking to get on the ground just because, like, he kind of throws with a lot of power, even if it's not with a lot of technique. But, you know, when Paul Craig, like, he can't just keep pulling guard and expecting that guys are going to engage with that, knowing that that's his best way to win.
Exactly.
Especially when you can exploit him on the feet. Because, like, if you're not a very skilled striker, it might be a little more even, but Kaio's a knockout artist and has been for a minute. So I just think that this was, I don't know, it was a questionable matchup to even make, honestly, in my opinion.
I think Paul Craig definitely played with fire in this one and obviously got burned in this case. He's just a guy that, like you were saying, a guy who obviously wants to pull people in his guard. Maybe in this sense, he's like, all right, if I get knocked down, then I'll just, do what I've done so well throughout my career and work off my back. And then obviously he comes into my guard and then try to go for a submission finish that way. But you can't play that game with a guy who hits as hard as Borralho does. So I think, he saw the result there. It was pretty clear coming in that you knew that Kaio was going to want to keep it on the feet the entire time, and it didn't.
Right when Paul Craig started to be like pulling guard to get it to the ground, I was like, this isn't good. Because most of the time, like, he's getting kind of like rocked on the feet, and it would just kind of be in a scramble, and it just wasn't a very good matchup, honestly. In hindsight, I think maybe on the outset you could think about it like, oh, this is a fun striker versus grappler type of matchup, but I think that this one was a little more one-sided than the UFC probably hoped it was gonna be, but. Either way, I mean, Kyle is really fun to watch. Honestly, maybe him versus Michel Pereira next. I didn't even think of that until just now, but, I mean, the timelines would line up, and they're both 185. I think Kyle's even ranked. He's ranked number 14. Well, going to be ranked number 13 because he just beat Paul Craig, who's ranked above him. So that could be an option. I think that would be a fun fight, maybe a co-main of one of those Apex cards, bring them up, maybe UFC Vegas 100, the ultimate UFC Apex card that we've been hyping up just for our own fun. But, the main card was fun. Obviously wasn't the exact same as UFC 299 and 300. It was almost impossible, I think, for them to live up to that type of excitement. But, considering the, I guess, lack of hype that we had for this card, I think that it really lived up to it. I mean, even the prelims were kind of fun in certain points. I just wrote down a couple fights here that I wanted to just mention real quick. But, like, Joe Anderson Brito had, in my opinion, the best performance of his career versus Jack Shore. You could argue the stoppage was questionable because of that cut on his leg, but I don't think that fight was going to go any differently if it went the distance. Brito really had the upper hand. He looked faster, more powerful, and those leg kicks, man, were just brutal. And the other thing that I noticed was, like, even when Jack Shore was trying to go for the takedowns, Brito just looked like he was too strong and it wasn't really working. And I really think Jack Shore might be best served to go back down to 135 like he was. I mean, I know it's a tough weight cut, but it seems like his grappling just isn't as strong at 145. And I mean that literally, like, not in terms of his technique. I just mean he doesn't seem to have that extra oomph that he kind of needs to get these guys down. And, if he can't take Joe Anderson Brito down, he's not going to be taking down those guys in the top 5 like a Brian Ortega or Max Holloway or like those guys who are really in those title discussions. So I don't really know what's next for Jack Shore, but, I like him. I think he's a good fighter. So I hope that he figures something out, whether it be maybe bulking up a little more at 145 or maybe considering going back down. But besides that, really the only one I wanted to talk about was Mauricio Duffy. Crazy UFC debut, really good fight for him versus Jamie Mullarkey, who's, we know Jamie Mullarkey, he's always coming for a scrap, and that's how this fight went. But Duffy, just his striking really reminded me of Conor McGregor's in the sense where he was really timing his shots well and, picking him apart from a distance until he got that finish. And the fucking, God, man, the scissor sweep that he hit on Mullarkey to set up that knockout, dude. Yeah. That was a fun finish, man. I think that people need to keep their eyes on Duffy because that seems like he'll be a real problem at some point in the UFC. But, not the best pay-per-view of all time, but, we knew it was going to be hard for them to top the last two. I think all things considered, this was a pretty fun event. But, it wasn't the only thing we had this weekend. We said in the beginning of the show we wanted to talk some boxing, and first we'll talk some Canelo. Canelo versus Munguia. Obviously, Canelo wins via unanimous decision, 117 to 110, 116, 111, 115, 112. This was honestly a really exciting fight, as we probably figured it was going to be. Two Mexican fighters, Cinco de Mayo weekend, and Munguia, even though he lost, he had his moments, especially early. But once Canelo dropped him in the fourth, it seemed like it was kind of one-sided from there, even though Munguia showed just relentless pressure and heart to try and do something as that fight was going on. But Canelo just did Canelo things in there, man. He proved once again why he's regarded as one of the greatest boxers of this era. So what did you think about this one, man?
Yeah, man. I mean, whether or not you want to call Canelo more of a slower starter or not, here's like he continues to find a way to just get the job done and keep guys beneath him. Because obviously here, Munguia had his moments early, and then really all it took was that fourth round knockdown, and it was just all Canelo from there.
Even like in that fourth round, like when Jaime, because I know it's not Jamie, it's like Jaime.
Yeah.
Munguia, he hit Canelo with like a few big shots like right before that, and like
yeah, dude.
It was really turned into a brawl. But Canelo just has so much power,
dude. He's so fucking jacked, and it's just he's able to eat those punches and give it right back to you that much harder. So.
He's something else, man.
Exactly.
He really is. I think like now his record is what, like 61, 2-2.
Yep.
Like it's hard to fathom that he's had that many fights and he's won that many.
He's one of these guys that really just has the freedom to do whatever the hell he wants, pretty much, in the boxing verse. And then which leads us perfectly into the Oscar De La Hoya, controversy and stuff. Because, man, that was handled so poorly by De La Hoya, man.
Yeah. I mean, you got a guy in Jaime Munguia who is clearly such a great up-and-coming star. He took the fight to Canelo, who's one of the best boxers in the world. And the hype was not around Munguia, but around Canelo and Oscar De La Hoya's, long-standing beef. And Oscar has to take Oscar takes the hype away from his own fighter to address this beef and to basically start something with Canelo during the press conference, which, leave it to a boxing promoter to make it about himself rather than the fighters, because that's the big problem nowadays with boxing, it seems like. And Oscar De La Hoya, he's had his problems as of late in general, just, with all the beefs that he gets in. It's not just Canelo who doesn't like Oscar De La Hoya. But I just thought that was really unprofessional of him to, stand up there and just berate Canelo, reading off of basically a script, which he couldn't even really read that well. And Canelo had his choice words in response to Oscar De La Hoya. But I just think it's really unfortunate because Munguia really kind of showed a lot of skill in this fight, a lot of heart. And I really think that we're going to see some great things from him in the future. But we wouldn't have really known that going into the fight because Oscar spent, most of the time that people really saw hyping his beef with Canelo rather than his own fighter. And I think that that's kind of why a lot of people don't really like Oscar. So I just didn't really like it. I thought that if, he could have just promoted this fight for what it was, two of the best Mexican fighters in that weight class going up against one another, Cinco de Mayo weekend, that's all you needed to say. And the fight lived up to the hype too, because those guys just really went at it, and Canelo just showed his greatness as the fight went on. So it just sucks that there was that little side story with De La Hoya and Canelo, because we didn't need it. You know what I mean? Just didn't need it. But, you talk about the future too. Like you said, Canelo is such a big superstar worldwide, but especially here in North America, in Mexico and the United States. I think that there's two fights that just need to happen very soon. Well, one more than the other, but the first one that everybody's always been talking about is Canelo versus Benavidez. I think that fight, I think it should be next, personally. I just think because kind of like Crawford versus Spence in a way, it's like one of those fights that we've been hearing about over and over and over again. I think eventually that needs to be settled, and I think that that's really the fight to make. But we've also heard some sources out of Saudi Arabia have been talking about maybe Canelo versus Terrence Crawford being in the work, which, as a fight fan, I would love to see it. It's just crazy to think about, but like rationally, Canelo's fighting at 168. Crawford's fighting at like 147, so they'd have to meet somewhere in the middle. I can't even really remember the last time Canelo didn't fight at 168, and even before that, he was fighting at middleweight, which is just 160. So I think that Crawford would probably have to go up to that, which, it sounds crazy, but we were talking about it before the pod. They're both 5'8", and yeah, Canelo's, a lot more jacked and he's a bigger dude, but if Terence Crawford can kind of take the time and bulk up a little bit, it's not necessarily like out of the realm of possibility that those guys could match up really well. And I guess between those two fights, which one would you want to see more?
It definitely, both would be fantastic, but I'm in agreement with you about Benavidez needing to happen. I think should happen first, obviously. But once again, like when it comes to Canelo, he's built his name to the point where he's international superstar. Obviously, that's what Oscar De La Hoya has obviously a hard time like processing that it's Canelo's time. It's been Canelo's time. Like some guys, they just transcend not only themselves but the sport itself. And instead of trying to go against that because you're the promoter and then you're the one obviously selling the fight and all of that, like just embrace it and let the guy speak freely and just go in there and obviously handle business. So in this case, I think there's still a fight to be made, obviously. If you get whenever Canelo is going to be ready for it, then
probably September. With him lately, it's always been Cinco de Mayo and then the Mexican Independence Day weekend, September, mid-September usually. So I feel like that's when we'll see him again. Whether it is against Benavidez, not sure, maybe. But I don't think it's very likely that Crawford is the next one. But in Saudi Arabia, man, they do a good job at making those big fights. I mean, they've made Fury versus Ngannou, Joshua versus Ngannou. Now they've made Fury versus Usyk. So, I mean, they're pretty effective one way or another. I think it's because they pay these guys astronomical amounts of money. But who knows? Maybe it could be in the near future. But I think that Canelo Benavidez just needs to happen. Mm-hmm. But let's talk about the other fight from this weekend, Inoue versus Nery. Nery, the names this week are going to kill me, man. I swear. Just know that I know my fights, even if I don't know my names. But I'll let you take the reins with this one because I know you really wanted to talk about it. So
yeah, man. So I got up early enough to catch the top ranked main event. Hadn't watched. I definitely hadn't watched enough Inoue yet to really give a firm stance. But obviously, knowing that the record already speaks for itself, he's got just pretty much every fucking bantamweight belt that there is to have. He's got some flyweight belts, and then obviously the undefeated record, 24 knockouts, clearly new. And then in this, what I didn't know as well was that this event in Tokyo was the first boxing event there in 30 years or something.
Really? That's kind of crazy.
Yep. So they got obviously the right guy. They got their guy in Inoue to get in there and obviously take on a mandatory challenger, but clearly a very worthy mandatory challenger, and Inoue-Nery. And then coming into the fight, Nery was those odds are pretty good on Nery too, because now obviously that it's happened already. You see that the guy is the first guy ever to drop Inoue, and he did it very early in that first round as well. And then it was from there, everybody just kind of stood still for a second and was whoa, could this really be happening right now? And even Inoue just had a that face of all right, this guy's coming to brawl. So, but I think at the same time as well, I think it's very fair to say that Inoue probably just got a little too comfortable, obviously fighting in front of his home crowd and all that. Had his hands down, definitely a bit too much, backing up, and Nery was able to land just a super clean, powerful left hook to get that to drop Inoue there. Then from there, there was still flashes for Nery that you thought he could pull off the the wild upset and be that one in Inoue's record, but Inoue's, man, clearly when it comes to speed, I heard there was someone on the commentary talking about speed versus timing, how speed beats timing, because with a guy like Inoue, when you're already able to land the shots that you do as fast as he does, like that overwhelms clearly a lot of guys. And Nery clearly brought the power to the fight, but man, Inoue was he landed plenty of body shots and then still got knockdowns of his own before inevitably knocking out Nery in the 6th round. And it was just seriously like a thing of beauty. Like I was like really like glad I got to see that like live, happening really for the first time. And so it just really does make you appreciate like this guy, definitely one of the greatest to in this time frame, in this generation. Afterwards now, he's got another mandatory challenger who's also undefeated, Sam Goodman, who's from Australia. I definitely want to catch that when it happens, probably in like September or something. But when it comes to like going forward in terms of legacy and all that, there's talks about, is it Bud Crawford? Is it Inoue? And then, down the road, we're going to see Alexander Usyk fight Tyson Fury finally. Who truly is that number 1 pound for pound king? I think the debate's obviously fun to have. However you might feel about it, obviously without disrespecting anybody, but either way, like both guys, Terence Crawford, Naoya Inoue, 1 and 2, wherever you want to order it, whatever. Like it's clear cut. These two just continue to just put on awesome title fights that fans, are dying to see. They finish their opponents, and that's just all you can ask for really as a boxing fan at the end of the day from the best fighters in the world. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm standing on it. Like I said, we'll see what Usyk can pull out of his hat against obviously one of the greatest of all time in Tyson Fury, coming soon, May 18th. So yeah, man, just good stuff going on for boxing right now for sure.
Honestly, man, and I'm so glad that we have the chance to talk about Inoue, because he's a guy who is so exciting to watch and has been really throughout his career. But we talked a little bit about this before we went on. Like, he doesn't really get the credit from like the mainstream audience that he deserves, because I said this, he almost has like a similar type of career trajectory as Mighty Mouse in the UFC, Demetrius Johnson. Like, he's winning all of these fights against really good contenders in very impressive ways, but the contenders that he's fighting, they don't have that name value where like the more casual fan is giving him the credit that he deserves. And hopefully this fight, because it was so exciting, hopefully that means maybe more eyeballs are going to be on him in the future. I know that there's other guys out there with like bigger names, like like Tank Davis, Terence Crawford. You mentioned Tyson Fury too, Usyk, Canelo. We literally just spoke about probably is the biggest star in boxing if we really have to think about it. But a guy like Inoue, you can't overlook that skill, and there's a reason why he's 27-0 with 24 knockouts. And Nery brought the fight to him. You mentioned the power. You could clearly see that he had that power, but Inoue is just so quick, and he lands in like those crazy bursts and a bunch of combos. And I just think he's one of the best in the world.
When it comes to the pound for pound debate between him and Bud Crawford, I think really like the only thing that I can give to people like really trying to make that argument for Inoue would be the activity. In terms of Inoue is just been more active and whatnot, whereas Bud Crawford obviously not as much, which is like uncharacteristic in a way. But at the same time, like you can't take away from what Bud Crawford just gave us arguably the biggest boxing fight that this decade has given us so far between him and Errol Spence. Got his hand raised there, and just going forward, there's still obviously bigger things to chase for him. So you can't rule him out yet, and that's why I just feel like instead of pitting the two up against each other, like, because what I was seeing also was anyway just got dropped. Or like there's no way he can possibly be number 1 after that. But it's like that's what makes like some of the greatest fighters. They get knocked down, they get back up, and they get the job done somehow. And so this was the first time in Inoue's career that happened, and he won convincingly, obviously. And we've obviously seen Terence Crawford do the same in the past before. So instead of just putting them up against each other like that and going button heads on who's number one, like, we just gotta sit back, let it wash over us, enjoy the greatness, because these two are just absolutely two of the greatest ever. So
yeah. Honestly, the thing too with the activity, I think that Terence Crawford, because he's fighting more of like the bigger stars in boxing, he probably has to deal with the politics of it way more than Inoue does. And, that's kind of not really his fault. Also, I mean, maybe you could say some of the blame could be on him for that, but you can't really blame a guy for trying to get paid the most amount of money for the biggest fights. So I agree with you. I think we should just appreciate greatness. We have such a fun era of boxing kind of starting. When we started the podcast, I remember we had like a lot of criticism about how the boxing world was going, because the best weren't fighting the best at really any of the weight classes. Really, even at heavyweight, like Fury Wilder were really the biggest fights that were going on, and whoever Canelo was fighting at those times. But now it seems like really at all of the weight classes, just from the bottom to the top, we're really getting a lot of the fights that we want to see, and we're getting these stars who are, making their names even bigger as they keep winning fights. So I mean, like I said, and like you said, I think we should just appreciate the greatness that's in front of us. I'm looking forward to his next fight, especially after I watch this one, because honestly, it flew under the radar for me. I won't even lie to you. Like, the Canelo fight was there for me, and then, obviously we had the UFC pay-per-view. I didn't even really hear about this fight. And I will say this, I usually do give Inoue my time when I know he's fighting. So I'm actually shocked that I didn't really see this one coming. But I'm glad that we both ended up watching it, and we could give him some shine on the pod, because he does deserve it. But next week is kind of similar to this week, just maybe a little bit on a lesser scale. For the UFC, we have UFC St. Louis. We got Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. And that should be a fun card. Any of the cards that they have fans for, they're automatically just a little bit of a step above. And anytime two heavyweights get in there for a main event, you never know how long it's going to last, especially with a Derek Lewis fight. So we'll see how that one goes. But then in boxing, too, we have Lomachenko versus Kambosos at lightweight. And who knows, maybe the winner of that fight can get a title fight next. And either way, two of the biggest stars in that division. We literally just talked about how we're starting to see more of the stars fight each other. This is another huge fight, and I can't wait to see it. We have a lot to talk about next week, clearly, and hopefully you'll join us then. So.
Feels just like a superstar. Doing all these drugs, I don't think I'm gonna see tomorrow. Living fast, brand new dash up in a foreign car. It's the type of shit that you be doing